I've been a truck driver for over 2 decades, hauling freight across every stretch of highway in America. I've seen things on the road that would make most people shudder, but nothing prepared me for what happened that night on the old Appalachian Highway. What I experienced was so terrifying, so utterly unexplainable, that it still haunts me to this day. My name is Greg Thompson, and I've spent the better part of my life behind the wheel of a semi-truck. I'm not the type to get spooked easily. When you've been on the road as long as I have, you learn to brush off the odd noises, the strange sights, the unsettling encounters. But what I'm about to tell you isn't something I can easily brush off. It's something that stayed with me, lurking in the corners of my mind, making me question what's real and what isn't. It was late October, just a few days before Halloween, and the weather was starting to turn. The air had a chill to it, and the nights were getting longer, darker. I had a load to deliver from Pennsylvania to Georgia, and I was determined to make good time. The route I planned to take was one I'd driven countless times before, a shortcut through the Appalachian Mountains that shaved off a couple of hours. I figured it would be a routine drive just like any other, but that night was anything but routine. As I made my way deeper into the mountains, the weather took a turn for the worse. Thick fog began to roll in, swallowing the road ahead of me. I could barely see 10 feet in front of the truck. I slowed down, but I kept going. I was on a tight schedule, and I didn't want to lose any time. Besides, I'd driven through fog before. It was just another challenge of the job. But this fog was different. It wasn't just thick. It was oppressive, like it had a weight to it, pressing down on the truck, on me. The air inside the cab grew colder, and I found myself shivering, even though the heater was on full blast. I tried to shake off the feeling of unease that was creeping up my spine. I told myself it was just the fog, just the cold. But deep down, I knew something was wrong. Then, out of nowhere, my CB radio crackled to life. At first, it was just static, the kind you hear when you're out of range. But then, through the static, I heard a voice. It was faint, distorted, like it was coming from far away, but I could make out a few words. "Don't stop road." I grabbed the microphone and asked who was there, but the voice cut out, leaving only the crackle of static. I stared at the radio, trying to make sense of what I just heard. Was it another trucker trying to warn me about something? But there were no other vehicles around, no lights, no signs of life on that desolate stretch of highway. As I pondered this, I noticed something up ahead, a figure standing in the middle of the road. I hit the brakes, and the truck screeched to a halt, my heart pounding in my chest. The figure was barely visible through the fog, but I could make out the outline of a person. They weren't moving, just standing there, blocking the road. I squinted through the windshield, trying to get a better look. It was a woman dressed in an old-fashioned, tattered dress. Her hair was long, matted, and wet, like she'd been caught in a downpour. But there hadn't been any rain. I rolled down the window, and the cold, damp air rushed in, sending a shiver down my spine. I called out to her, asked if she needed help, but she didn't respond. She just stood there, staring at me with those hollow, empty eyes that seemed to bore into my soul. Every instinct in my body was telling me to drive away, to leave this woman behind and never look back. But something held me there, something I couldn't explain. I got out of the truck, my boots crunching on the gravel as I approached her. The closer I got, the more I realized there was something wrong, terribly wrong. Her skin was pale, almost translucent, and her eyes, they weren't just empty, they were void of any life. When I was just a few feet away, she suddenly lifted her arm and pointed down the road, her hand trembling. I followed her gaze, but all I could see was more fog, more darkness. I turned back to ask her what she meant, but she was gone. She hadn't walked away. She hadn't run. She had simply vanished, as if she had never been there at all. I stumbled back to the truck, my hands shaking as I fumbled with the door handle. I jumped inside, slammed the door shut, and locked it, my heart racing. I tried to convince myself that I had imagined it, that the fog was playing tricks on my mind. But deep down, I knew better. I knew what I had seen, and it terrified me. As I sat there, trying to calm my nerves, the CB radio crackled to life again. This time, the voice was clearer, more distinct. It was a woman's voice, soft and calm, almost soothing. But the words she spoke sent a chill through my entire body. "Don't follow the road, Greg. It's not what it seems." My blood ran cold. How did she know my name? How could she possibly know who I was? Panic set in, and I threw the truck into gear, determined to get out of there as fast as I could. But as I pressed down on the gas, the road seemed to change before my eyes. The pavement beneath the tires vanished, replaced by a narrow, winding dirt path that twisted and turned through the dense fog. The trees on either side were dead, their gnarled branches reaching out like skeletal hands. I couldn't believe what I was seeing. This wasn't the highway I had been driving on just moments ago. It was something else entirely, something otherworldly. I tried to turn the truck around, but the path was too narrow, too treacherous. I had no choice but to keep moving forward, hoping that the road would eventually lead me back to safety. As I drove deeper into the unknown, the fog grew thicker, almost suffocating. The smell of decay filled the cab, making me gag. I could feel the cold seeping into my bones, and the air around me seemed to hum with an unnatural energy. My headlights barely penetrated the darkness, but I could make out shapes moving in the fog, shadows that seemed to dance and flicker just out of sight. Then, without warning, the truck stalled. The engine sputtered and died, and no matter how hard I tried, it wouldn't turn over. I was stranded, alone, in the middle of nowhere, surrounded by a fog that seemed to be alive. I sat there in silence, my breath coming in short, panicked gasps, as I tried to figure out what to do next. That's when I heard it. The sound of footsteps, slow and deliberate, coming from behind the truck. My heart leapt into my throat, and I grabbed my flashlight, my hands trembling as I fumbled to turn it on. I didn't want to get out, but I had no choice. I needed to see who or what was out there. I stepped out of the cab, the flashlight beam cutting through the fog. The footsteps grew louder, closer, and I could see a figure emerging from the darkness. It was the woman, the same one I had seen on the road, but she was different now. Her eyes glowed with a faint, eerie light, and her mouth was twisted into a sinister smile. Behind her, more figures began to materialize, dozens of them, their faces hidden in the shadows. They didn't move, didn't speak, just watched as the woman pointed at me again, her smile widening. The words she spoke were barely audible, but they echoed in my mind, clear as day. Leave before it's too late. I didn't need to be told twice. I scrambled back into the cab, my heart racing as I frantically tried to start the engine. After what felt like an eternity, the truck roared to life, and I floored the gas, tearing down the narrow path as fast as I could. The fog began to lift, the dead trees faded into the background, and soon, I found myself back on the main highway, the familiar pavement beneath my tires. I didn't slow down, didn't look back, not until I was miles away with the safety of civilization in sight. Even then, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was still watching me, lurking just beyond the edge of the light. I never took that route again. Whatever that road was, it wasn't meant for the living, and I wasn't about to find out what would have happened if I had stayed. Have you ever experienced something that defies explanation? Something that's left you questioning reality? Share your story.